So I have finally found a side hustle that feels like it's worth doing and feels like it's worth your time. Not like Uber, Lyft, which I have also tried in the past. But in this video, I'm just going to show you guys what I did, how I got my side hustle business to where it's at today, how it's looking for me at this point after 2.5 years. And I wouldn't be sharing this with you guys if I didn't feel like it was worth my time, because this side hustle has actually proven itself. It actually makes it feel like it's worth my time. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what I do in the woodworking world, specifically building cedar planters. And so I really appreciate you guys for watching. Let's get right into it. So I started building these cedar planters a couple years ago just because I needed to get out of debt. And of course, who doesn't need a little bit of extra money on the side? So I did have a full-time job building these things, but these things have dramatically changed my life, helped me get out of debt, like I mentioned. But they're real simple to build, and it was a fun little woodworking thing that I got to pick up. But basically, it just starts off by picking up some cedar fence pickets. You can always get dog ear fence pickets, or redwood also works. I just like the look of the cedar, and it's not a super expensive side hustle, guys. You know, you just need to invest into a any kind of saw. You know, it could be a jigsaw, a circular saw, a miter saw, and then any kind of driver, whether that be an impact or a drill or both. But you know, if you're starting out and you got a budget, you know, just get the saw and the and one of the drivers. And when I started out, all I had was a circular saw and a couple of drills. You know. And before I had my table saw and everything, this is how I would make all my cuts, guys. I only had a circular saw. I didn't even have the miter saw when I first started out. I literally started with this bundle right here from Milwaukee, and I was able to get all my cuts done. So, and then also, you guys see me with the nail gun. You don't even need the nail gun. You could just get some screws, because that kit comes with the drill and the impact. So, I mean, basically, you just, you know, you can customize this all to your liking, all to what your customer wants to do. Like I mentioned, you don't need the nail gun like I'm using there. And the clamps and all that stuff is just extras. As you can see, I just put the two pieces together, added some legs. You know, the legs, you can cut them at custom sizes as well, guys. But speaking of tools, you don't need to go out and even buy that Milwaukee set. You know, it's just something of preference there. You know, there's plenty of companies out there that are more budget friendly than Milwaukee. I just really do prefer Milwaukee, and I like Milwaukee. I've always used Milwaukee. But you could always choose, you know, the Harbor Freight tools always get things done. DeWalt has good tools. Ryobi has good tools, but you don't necessarily need to be going out and buying, you know, Milwaukee. You probably will make your money back within your first or second sale of these planters. And so yeah, I would just go to Home Depot or Lowe's, or if you guys do have like a Menards or something like that where they got some reliable cedar, I would just go over there, you know, and just starting out, I would just thumb through a couple of them, just, you know, start looking through which ones are the straightest ones. I used to spend, you know, anywhere between 15 to 45 minutes grabbing a whole bundle of cedar pickets, just to make a couple planters. Most of my orders were made to order, so you know, I wasn't just, you know, going out and buying a bunch of stuff that I didn't necessarily need. This was at the beginning, but I would just go to Home Depot, thumb through, you know, weed out all the ones that are all bent and warped, and then take home a bundle of the straight ones. And then so yeah, I'd build a planter, post it up on Facebook Marketplace. You know, also mention that I'm doing custom orders, so that when somebody sees your listing, you know, in the description, it also mentions that you do customs. And then so what really worked for me was mentioning that I did customs, and then when somebody went ahead and gave me a custom dimension that they needed a planter to be, you know, I would build that planter that they asked for, and then I would take a picture of that one and then make a listing for that specific one. So then it you know, it kind of just it gave me momentum. It gave me more listings, more planners that people were more interested in. And little by little, that's really how I generated my itinerary, or my Facebook Marketplace profile, with all the planters that I have. It really just started out by just doing exactly that. You know, people asking for custom dimensions, building those. Then I had my first person ask for a trellis. I built that, made a listing for that. You know, and then I learned how to build the trellis. I had never even built a planter with a trellis until somebody asked me to do it for them. So it was just a huge, you know, it was a cool process. I learned a lot in the process, and it really just became something that, you know, a lot of people were looking for. I never even realized that so many people were into cedar planters like that. And you know what I think a lot of it is that most of these people were growing food in these planters, because the cedar, most people don't want finish on the cedar because it kind of contaminates food. So that's another thing, guys. I know a lot of people ask, do I finish the planters? Do I paint them? Do I weatherproof them? That's the beautiful thing about cedar. A lot of people are looking for it so that they can grow food, grow herbs, grow vegetables. And it's a win-win for you, for you and the customer, because for you, you just have to build the planter. You know, you don't have to really stain it or seal it. And I would just, you know, for sure mention that to them, or just put it in the description of your listings. But if people are growing food, they kind of already expect it to be unfinished cedar. It's weather and rot resistant. It's not 100% rot proof and weatherproof, but it is very resistant and it lasts a long time. That's why they're sold as fence pickets, because they're just meant for outdoor use. And you know, it just really helps you know, for planter use. And most of the time when people are ordering these things, they're not just buying one. You know, people, you know, end up buying 4 or 5. You know, I've had orders of 8, 10. You know, so and I would definitely recommend when you're starting out to give bundle deals. You know, if they're buying 2 or more, you know, knock off a certain amount of money. It'll just really help you get your business going and your reviews up. You know, people always also end up coming back for more planters. And then they also even end up asking you for other little things like little benches. You know, they know that you can build a planter, so then they actually end up thinking that, you know, you might be fit for another project. You know, they might have something that they need done at their house. And, you know, that's a great way to get into carpentry in general, you know, not just woodworking. And, you know, little by little, man, you start, you know, knowing the tips and all the tricks about carpentry. You know, I'm not a super professional carpenter, but building these planters has definitely taught me a lot of things. You know, it's opened up a lot of doors for me. I'd probably say, you know, close to 40% of the people that I build planters for, they end up asking me if I can do other things. And most of the time I say no, just because I do get a lot of planter orders, and that's just, you know, something that I'm for sure like I'm sure on. You know, sometimes you get something, you get like a order, or somebody wants something different, and you know, you don't not necessarily waste time learning it, but you still have to figure things out. You know, expenses might come up that you're not used to. So for me personally, I just stick to the planters. That's what I know, that's what I build. I know what goes into it. I know the expenses that, you know, that it comes with. And so I just like to keep the flow of making money. You know, it's not to say that I don't want to build other things. I definitely do want to learn other things. But in this season of my life, you know, it's just stacking money, keeping the business of the planters going. And that's just where I'm at. And me personally, I found most of my success on Facebook Marketplace. I have tried things like OfferUp and Craigslist, and I do get a couple of inquiries on Craigslist and OfferUp, but I pretty much get 99% of my work on Facebook Marketplace. And I would just, you know, recommend you figure out which one works best for you. You know, not everybody's area is the same. Not everybody's area is going to respond the same way to listings. So I just, you know, play with it, play around with the listings, you know, see what works for you. And then, you know, little by little, as you come up and, you know, you start saving up a little bit of money, you start adding a couple little cool tools to your you know, to your shop. You know, you get your miter saw, and that'll really help you speed things up a bit. Because when I first started out, I was just using my circular saw, like I mentioned, and I would try to get as many pieces cut at once as I could. And for my circular saw, I could only cut like 3 pieces at a time. And then when I finally upgraded to my miter saw, I was finally able to cut, I think it's I could cut like 6 to 7 pieces at once. So it just really helps on the big orders. It helps you stay efficient, cutting as much as possible at once. And then another thing that really helped me too was the table saw. The table saw, I kind of waited on that just because I would use my circular saw to make the rip cuts. Even after I got the miter saw, I waited a little bit for the table saw. But what I did learn very quickly was that the circular saw is not as powerful as the table saw, because I definitely burned one out. I remember I had a big order, and this was after I had already put my circular saw to a bunch of use. I had a big order that I needed to cut a bunch of legs, and I was making a lot of rip cuts, like one after another, and I burned my circular saw out. And that one, it was not a fuel, a Milwaukee fuel circular saw. It was just a baseline, like that one in that bundle I showed you guys earlier. So I burned it out. It was even before a year. So what I ended up doing was just buying another circular saw. I ran that for a little bit. I ran it the same way as I ran that other one, but I didn't run it for long until I did end up getting the table saw. But yeah, like I mentioned, guys, little by little, you know, as you start making money in the business, you kind of reinvest it into the business so that you can become more efficient. And it's just a fun process, you know. And at this point for me, for planters, I definitely have everything that I need as far as tools. I've got my systems figured out. You know, I'll sometimes pre-cut certain legs or whatever the case may be. I don't usually cut, you know, like certain pieces for planters. I'll just cut them per order that I get. But I will sometimes cut the top trim pieces beforehand. I'll have a couple of those ready. I'll cut some legs beforehand when I have a little bit of downtime, and I'll just have stuff like that ready for when the orders start flowing in. Especially if you're watching at the recording of this video, it's currently January, so getting ready for the spring season when the orders start cracking and start rolling in like crazy. But yeah, so this is definitely the time of year when it starts getting cracking, especially summer. Summer gets really busy. It just really depends on where you're at. And then for me also, at this point, I've ended up buying by the pallet. I buy the cedar fence pickets by the pallet. I usually buy them by two pallets at a time, and I get them delivered. And I usually get them through Lowe's. And yes, I do get a lot of bad pieces in the pallets. But what I end up doing with those bad pieces is I use them for the floor of the planter. You know, sometimes I can still get a rip cut out of them on the table saw. So there's still definitely ways to utilize the pieces that are bad in the stacks of pallets. And on top of that, when you buy in bulk like that, you get a super big discount. I think for me, I'm getting them just around $2 a piece. If you're not getting them by the pallet, I believe you're paying about $3.50. So for me, it's definitely worth it. You know, I don't really mind getting a couple bad pieces, especially if I could, you know, still utilize them in all of my builds and get a sweet discount on them. It really helps. It helps those profits out. And it just helps me save a lot of time, you know, because I'm not having to go over there, thumb through pieces, drive over to Home Depot and Lowe's. You know, I get the delivery. So it really helps me out. And with all that being said, guys, I have a bunch of tutorials on my channel already that you can go ahead and watch and learn and how to build these planters and start making money as soon as possible. But like I mentioned, I would recommend, you know, getting a little set, one of those bundles from one of these companies. I think they all have, you know, a 3-piece or a 5-piece tool set. It just depends on your budget of the time being. So I would definitely recommend going ahead and doing that. If you got a little bit of extra cash, I definitely would start off with a miter saw. You know, at least 10-inch miter saw. I personally run a 12-inch blade miter saw. But if you got the money for that, go ahead and do that. But if you're on a little bit of a budget, I definitely would recommend, you know, just starting out at least with a circular saw and a drill or an impact. Or you know what, you could even get away with just doing a circular saw and an impact gun or a drill. You know, just those two power tools. Even if they're corded, you know, you could eventually end up going with the battery powered. But a couple other tools that I would recommend starting out with as far as hand tools is obviously the tape measure. You're going to definitely need the tape measure. I'm 90% sure you got one of those laying around the house already. Maybe a hammer, you know, just to tack in, you know, just for certain little situations. And then definitely you're going to need a framing square, because that's going to help you if you're starting out with a circular saw. It's definitely going to help you cut straight. But also it's going to help you if you get creative and you start throwing in on your planters, if you start putting in center legs, like if the planter is like 5 feet long and you want to put a leg in the center of the planter, you know, that square is just definitely going to help you out, make things straight. And then also you're of course going to want to get some Titebond 3 glue. The glue definitely has to be Titebond 3. It's waterproof and it's their strongest glue. I probably wouldn't go with anything else other than Titebond. And the Titebond's going to last you a while. You know, a gallon of that stuff lasts me, it lasts me a bunch of planters. So start off with that, and it's definitely going to make you your money back. And by the time you run out of a gallon of Titebond glue, you're going to have a bank account full of money to go ahead and buy a couple more gallons. And then what I do is I just stock up, because they'll give you a bulk pricing at Home Depot or Lowe's. If you buy like 3 or 4 gallons, you end up getting a bulk price. But with that being said, guys, I really appreciate you guys for watching. Like I mentioned, go ahead and check out my channel. I have probably over 10 or so tutorials on different planters. I got some with the trellis. I got some without the trellis. You know, you could start getting creative and put some wheels on the planters. I got a video with a planter that has wheels on it. But, you know, most important, have fun with it. You know, go ahead and make some money. get creative, learn, be safe, you know, and I appreciate you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.